They want us to believe that there is not enough to go around. They want us to fall into themes of scarcity, and gamers reject that.
Hi, I'm Walker-Konno, and this is another video about communications for activists, where I'm excited to be talking to José Muñoz about what he found about how to communicate with gamers. José's Deputy Communications Director for United We Dream and United We Dream Action, is a DACA recipient who came to the US from Mexico when he was a few months old, and grew up queer and undocumented in Minneapolis in Minnesota. José ensures that the voice and strategy of immigrant youth and families are heard across the country through engaging the media, shaping news stories, developing narrative and message, as well as training directly impacted people to express themselves through the media. He's been in more media outlets than you can count, and I was really privileged to meet José on the Global Messaging Programme, an initiative with Neon in the UK and Anat Schenker-Osorio in the US. So here's the interview.
Well, my name is José Muñoz. I am a progressive communicator working specifically on immigration and electoral politics in the United States.
And we were on this program together, this global messaging program, and I found it really interesting, the language analysis that you did, which wasn't just about how do Latino men talk about migration, right? You went for something more specific and I think more interesting because of that. Could you explain a little bit what you chose and why?
Yeah, so my language analysis was really trying to dig into how gamers, like people who play video games, how they made sense about community and belonging, which I think at first maybe sounds very unrelated to the work that I do in immigration. But earlier this year, my organization, United We Dream and United We Dream Action, put out a report. We really wanted to dig into how, particularly Latinx folks here in the United States, how they were receiving information about immigration. So everything from what they were watching online, what they were watching on TV, we're thinking like YouTube. But one of the findings that we found most specifically, and that was most interesting to me, was the fact that for young Latino men, 18 to 35-year-olds, they really were not engaging in much content other than gaming. Like gaming was the one place where they were spending a majority of their time. And I was really interested in that. And I have younger brothers who spend a lot of time gaming. And so there was like a lot of interest for me in really digging deeper and wanting to really discover like what are the things that bring them into community, like how do they make sense of belonging, particularly online, as they're spending like a lot of time in this space. And so that was sort of how I got to my research question.
And what did you find that they were talking about? Like, apart from obviously talking about the video games, what did you find that they were talking about that you thought was relevant to kind of a progressive political conversation?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of hours on YouTube. I spent a lot of hours on Twitch and Discord, spending time where like video gamers hang out. And I found really three things. The three things that I found were that gamers love a challenge, and there is so many different ways that this came up in the language that they used, in the way that they spoke to each other. A second thing is that they do things in community with other people, like they do them together, even, which I think actually was really surprising, because I think there's a lot of games obviously that are multiplayer games where people are online, they have the headphones on, they're talking to their friends, but there's a lot of games that are very individualistic. But even in those games, there were examples from my research where there are actually websites where folks were literally writing out, like typing out almost like a full blog of their entire experience playing the game. How do you beat this level? How do you get this achievement? And folks were doing that, and that was building community. And the third thing was that, they really liked to celebrate the victories that they had, and whether that was victories in the game, And then also whether it was the opportunities that they had as gamers to really transcend their gaming world into the real world. Like those were moments that they moved. And so those three things, I really classified them at first as like communication frameworks, because obviously that's how I think as a communicator. And so really thinking about, challenge accepted, which is the idea that they like to do hard things. We're all in this together, which is the idea that they'll do things in community with their friends. And we did it, which is this idea about celebrating, that thing. And the more I thought about it, I realized this is actually beyond just frameworks for communication. In a way, it's actually steps that you can take, one step, two step, three steps into actually mobilizing this audience in a way that really authentically speaks to how they're already spending their time.
And what kind of insight did that give you about potential ways that we or progressives or you as you campaigning in the United States could use those communication frameworks, those steps that you described?
I think this was where the point in my research where having a background in immigration actually really was helpful. And it was the reality that in a lot of the research that I did, gamers do not go into the gaming world and leave the like quote unquote real world behind. And I actually don't even like that I just used those words, because for folks who are in gaming, like that is their real life. Like they are engaging with real people who they may or may not know. I was seeing folks talking about real issues, talking about the cost of living, talking about Elon Musk buying Twitter. There was a lot of conversation on some of the streams that I was watching. I make the claim that I think gamers are actually primed for a pro-immigrant message. And the reason for that is because, we have a community of people who are used to doing hard things. It's not an easy issue to tackle. It is something that we need to do together. And so those are two of the key frames that I saw over and over in this research. And then the other thing that I would say, particularly to immigration, is you have a community of folks who are not bound by the idea of scarcity. When you're thinking about gaming, especially world building games, we're talking games like Minecraft, but that's not the only type of world building game that's out there. These are games where the universe in the game is so expansive. There are no constraints to it. And the thing about immigration is that sometimes folks who want to limit migration, folks who want to fearmonger and scapegoat immigrants, they want us to believe that there is not enough to go around. They want us to fall into themes of scarcity, and gamers reject that because that doesn't really exist necessarily in some of the worlds that they're engaging in. And so I think for that reason, I actually don't think it's a stretch, but for that reason, like I really think that gamers are primed, particularly on immigration. But I think as we're thinking about engaging this very specific audience in so many of the other issues we care about, it's finding how we can authentically merge those values together, because they are not siloed.
And you've already been busy turning this research into creative execution, right? Ahead of the midterm elections in the United States. Could you explain a little bit about how that's gone?
So I used the research and I really thought about like how do I deploy it in the short term. I was able to work with my organization to create a very short 15-second ad that used this research, that used all three of the mobilization or communication frames that I shared, doing hard things, doing it together with your friends, and celebrating that you've done it. And so we did an 8-bit style 15-second ad where you have a young human who is having to jump over obstacles to make sure that they can cast their vote. And then at the end of the video, he holds up a ballot and he like celebrates this thing that he had done. And really, it used a lot of the language that I had observed, and it tries to feed into this community something that they're relatively used to, something that comes from them. And so I'm really excited that that was able to come to life. And we're running that ad before in the lead up to the midterms here in the U.S., particularly targeting young men 18 to 35 on YouTube, where they spend a lot of time. And we're making sure that it's really targeted for our audience by making sure that we're targeting it in US zip codes that are over 70% Latinx populations.
Amazing. Well, good luck with the midterms. Whether or not I'll be able to get this video out in time for them, will maybe people who are watching it will know what happened. Thanks, Jose. That was fun.
Thank you, of course.